Sarah Chun wiped the grease from her hands with a dirty rag as she stepped back from the massive cargo hauler. The ship's engines hummed with perfect efficiency now, a sound that always brought her satisfaction. 3 days of work, but she'd managed to get the ancient Vorthan freighter running better than it had in decades. Incredible work, Human Chun. Captain Vextar clicked his mandibles in appreciation. The insectoid alien towered over her, his 4 arms gesturing excitedly. My ship has not performed this well since it left the factory pods. Sarah shrugged, trying not to show how pleased she was with the compliment. Just doing my job, Captain. That'll be 8,000 credits. The Vorthan's antennae twitched. Of course. But first, I have something special for you. A bonus, you might say. Sarah raised an eyebrow. In her 5 years working as an independent mechanic on Nexus Station, she'd learned to be suspicious of alien bonuses. Usually they turn out to be worthless trinkets or, worse, something that would get her in trouble with station security. Captain Vextar scuttled over to a storage crate and began working the complex lock mechanism. You see, Human Shun, your people have quite the reputation throughout the galaxy. Stories of your ingenuity, your refusal to accept defeat, your ability to make something work no matter how impossible the situation. Thanks, I guess. Sarah wasn't sure where this was going. So when I acquired this particular item, I thought immediately of finding a human who might appreciate it. The lock clicked open, and Vextar reached inside. The Zephyrian traders who sold it to me said it was some sort of joke item from an ancient civilization. Completely worthless, they assured me. He pulled out what looked like a crystalline egg about the size of a football. It was beautiful, Sarah had to admit. The crystal surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury, catching the station's artificial light and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. It's pretty, Sarah said cautiously, but I don't really collect. Oh, but wait until you hear the best part. Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Sarah had learned was alien laughter. The Zephyrians claimed it was a dragon egg. Can you imagine? As if dragons were real. They said it would only hatch for someone with a true warrior's heart and unbreakable will. What nonsense! Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She'd heard stories about dragons, of course. Ancient legends from a dozen different species, all suspiciously similar. Massive creatures of incredible power and intelligence, supposedly extinct for millions of years. Most scientists dismissed them as sheer mythology. I couldn't possibly, Sarah started. Nonsense. Considerate payment for making my ship purr like a factory-fresh machine. Besides, Vextar's voice dropped to what he probably thought was a whisper. Between you and me, I think the Zephyrians are trying to get rid of it. They seemed rather nervous when they handed it over. Before Sarah could protest further, the alien had placed the egg in her hands. The moment her skin made contact with the crystal surface, she felt something. A warmth, almost like a heartbeat, pulsing gently through the strange material. Enjoy your joke, dragon, Human Shun. Vextar clicked in amusement as he transferred the credits to her account and headed for his ship's airlock. Sarah stood alone in her workshop, holding the egg and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The smart thing would be to sell it, or maybe donate it to the station's xenoarchaeology department. But something about the way it felt in her hands made her hesitate. Her workshop was a cramped space in the industrial section of Nexus Station, filled with tools, spare parts, and half-finished projects. She'd converted a storage alcove into a small living area with a bed, a tiny kitchen, and a desk where she kept her technical manuals. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She set the egg carefully on her workbench and tried to focus on her next project, a finicky atmosphere processor that kept cutting out. But her eyes kept drifting back to the crystalline surface. The pattern seemed to be moving more actively now, swirling and shifting in ways that definitely hadn't been happening before. 3 hours later, as she was debugging the processor's control circuits, a soft crack made her look up. A hairline fracture had appeared in the egg's surface, glowing with a faint golden light. "Oh no," Sarah muttered. "Please don't tell me this thing is actually..." The crack spread, and More light began to seep out. Sarah grabbed her comm unit to call station security, then stopped. What was she going to say? Help! The dragon egg my customer gave me is hatching. They think she'd been sampling the engine coolants. The egg split open with a sound like breaking glass, and golden light filled the workshop. When the glow faded, Sarah found herself staring at the most ridiculous creature she'd ever seen. It was about the size of a house cat, with iridescent scales that shifted between blue and green. It had 4 legs, 2 small wings, and a long tail that ended in a decorative fin. Its head was proportionally too large for its body, giving it an almost cartoonish appearance. Large, bright yellow eyes blinked at her with obvious intelligence. "Mro," it said, tilting its head. Sarah blinked. "Did you just meow?" "Mro," the creature repeated, flapping its tiny wings and somehow managing to hover for a few seconds before landing back on the workbench. "This cannot be happening," Sarah said to herself. "Dragons are supposed to be massive, terrifying creatures of legend. Not whatever this is." The little dragon stretched like a cat, yawned to reveal needle-sharp teeth, and then began to groom itself with a forked tongue. It was possibly the least threatening thing Sarah had ever seen. Her comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Sarah glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. It was from Commander Reyes, the station's security chief. "Chun, we need to talk. My office. Now." Sarah looked at the dragon, which had finished grooming and was now exploring the workbench with obvious curiosity. It poked at a hydra spanner with one claw, then looked up at her expectantly. "Stay here," she told it firmly. "Don't touch anything. Don't break anything. And for the love of all that's mechanical, don't let anyone see you." "Mro," the dragon replied, sounding almost offended. Sarah grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, her mind racing. Commander Reyes was a fair man, but he ran a tight station. Unauthorized alien life forms were definitely against regulations. She needed to figure out what to do about her new pet before someone noticed. The security office was located in the station's administrative section, a 20-minute walk through the main corridors. Nexus Station was one of the largest trading posts in this sector of the galaxy, home to nearly 1 million beings from hundreds of different species. The corridors were always crowded with traders, travelers, and workers going about their business. Commander Reyes was a graying human in his 50s, a former military officer who'd taken a station job after retiring from active service. His office was spartanly furnished, with only a desk, 2 chairs, and a wall display showing the station status. "Sit down, Chun," he said without looking up from his datapad. "We have a problem." Sarah's heart rate spiked. "Sir, 3 hours ago, every sensor on this station picked up a massive energy discharge from the industrial section, specifically from your workshop." Now he did look up, his gray eyes studying her carefully. "Care to explain what you were working on that could generate that kind of reading?" Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't tell him about the dragon, but she needed some explanation for the energy spike. "I was testing a new power coupling design. Experimental stuff. Maybe I overloaded something." Reyes frowned. "The readings don't match any known power coupling technology. The energy signature was completely unique. Our science teams are very interested." "Science teams?" Sarah tried to keep the panic out of her voice. "Dr. Voss and her xenoarchaeology department specifically. She thinks the readings match theoretical predictions for certain types of ancient artifacts." Reyes leaned back in his chair. "You haven't acquired any unusual objects recently, have you, Chun?" The question was casual, but Sarah could see the trap being laid. Reyes knew something, or at least suspected. She had to make a choice: lie and risk getting caught later, or tell the truth and face the consequences now. Before she could answer, her comm unit chimed with an urgent message. The sender was listed as Workshop Security System, which was odd because she didn't have a security system. "Excuse me, sir," she said, checking the message. It was a single word: help. Sarah's blood went cold. Someone was in her workshop. Someone who had found the dragon. "I need to go," she said, standing abruptly. "Chun, We're not finished here. There's an intruder in my workshop, Sarah said, showing him the message. Security alert. Reyes was on his feet immediately. I'll send a team. No. The word came out sharper than Sarah intended. I mean, it's probably just a malfunction. Let me check out first. If there's really a problem, I'll call for backup. Reyes studied her for a long moment. You have 10 minutes, Chun. Then, I'm sending security whether you want it or not. Sarah nodded and practically ran from the office. She had to get back to her workshop before anyone else discovered what she was hiding. The little dragon might look harmless, but if the stories about dragons were even partially true, it could represent power beyond imagination. The kind of power that wars were fought over. The corridors seemed endless as she raced back to the industrial section. Her mind churned with possibilities, none of them good. Had someone broken into her workshop? Had the dragon been captured? Or worse, had it escaped and hurt someone? When she reached her workshop, the door was still sealed. Sarah keyed in her access code and stepped inside, looking around frantically. "Where are you?" she called out. "Moreau," came a response from under her workbench. Sarah dropped to her knees and peered underneath. The little dragon was crouched between two tool cases. Its scales shifted to a darker shade that almost perfectly matched the shadows. "Did you send that message?" Sarah asked, feeling ridiculous for talking to what amounted to a very strange pet. The dragon crawled out from its hiding spot and waddled over to her comm terminal. It placed one tiny claw on the interface, and the screen lit up with scrolling text. Intruders detected. Hostile intent confirmed. Request immediate assistance. Sarah stared at the screen, then at the dragon. "You can interface with computer systems?" "Moreau," the dragon replied, sounding almost smug. "What intruders? I don't see anyone." The dragon pointed one wing toward the ventilation shaft above the workbench. Sarah grabbed a scanner and aimed it at the vent. The readings showed 3 heat signatures moving through the station's air system, heading in their direction. "Oh, this just keeps getting better," Sarah muttered. She looked at the dragon, which was watching her with those impossibly bright eyes. "I don't suppose you have any other surprises I should know about?" The dragon tilted its head thoughtfully, then opened its mouth. A small puff of flame emerged, no bigger than what you might get from a lighter. "Great. You breathe fire." "Of course you do." Sarah ran her hands through her hair, trying to think. "Okay, listen. We got people coming who probably want to take you away and study you. That's not going to happen on my watch. But I need to know, are you dangerous? Will you hurt innocent people?" The dragon looked almost offended. It shook its head emphatically, then pointed to itself and made a gesture that somehow conveyed small and harmless. Sarah had to smile, despite the situation. Right, small and harmless, except for the computer hacking and the fire breathing. A soft scraping sound came from the ventilation shaft. Their uninvited guests were almost here. "Time to go," Sarah said, scooping up the dragon. To her surprise, it felt warm and solid in her arms, not at all like the fragile creature it appeared to be. "We're going to have to trust each other." She grabbed her emergency kit and headed for the maintenance tunnel that connected her workshop to the main power conduits. It wasn't a comfortable route, but it would get them away from whoever was coming through the vents. As they crawled through the narrow tunnel, Sarah's mind raced with questions. Who were the intruders? How had they known about the dragon? And what was she supposed to do with a mythical creature that seemed to think she was its new caretaker? Behind them, she heard the soft thud of bodies dropping into her workshop. Their pursuers had arrived, and they were probably not happy to find their target gone. The dragon in her arms made a soft, trilling sound, almost like a purr. Somehow, it was comforting. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it seemed to trust her. Now she had to figure out how to keep them both alive long enough to understand what was really going on. The maintenance tunnel stretched ahead into darkness, leading deeper into the station's infrastructure. Sarah had no idea where they were going, but anywhere was better than here. She just hoped she wasn't making a massive mistake by trusting a creature that shouldn't exist. Behind them, voices echoed through the ventilation system. Their hunters were already on their trail. The maintenance tunnels beneath Nexus Station were a maze of pipes, conduits, and access ways that even the station engineers rarely used. Sarah had explored them during her first year on the station, learning every shortcut and hidden passage in case she ever needed to move equipment discreetly. She never imagined she'd be using that knowledge to hide from mysterious intruders with a pocket-sized dragon. The little creature sat calmly in her arms as they navigated the narrow passages, its bright eyes taking in everything around them. Occasionally, it would point with one tiny claw toward a particular direction, and Sarah found herself following its guidance. Somehow, it seemed to know where they were going better than she did. After 20 minutes of crawling and climbing, they reached a wider maintenance bay where the station's primary power conduits converged. The steady hum of energy flowing through massive cables filled the air, and status lights blinked in complex patterns across dozens of control panels. Sarah set the dragon down on a work platform and collapsed against the support beam, breathing hard. The little creature immediately began exploring, hopping from surface to surface with surprising agility. "Okay," Sarah said, trying to catch her breath. "We need answers. Who were those people, and how did they know about you?" The dragon paused its exploration and looked at her with what seemed like sympathy. Then it waddled over to the nearest computer terminal and placed its claw on the interface. Text began scrolling across the screen, but this time it wasn't the simple messages from before. Complex diagrams and symbols flowed past, interspersed with what looked like star charts and mathematical equations. Sarah recognized some of it: advanced physics, quantum mechanics, even some theoretical work on dimensional manipulation that she'd studied in engineering school. "You trying to tell me something?" Sarah said, leaning closer to the screen. "But I'm not smart enough to understand it, am I?" The dragon made a soft chirping sound and touched the interface again. This time, the display shifted to simpler images, pictographs that told a story. Sarah watched as the symbols showed a great civilization among the stars, creatures of immense power and intelligence who served as guardians and teachers to younger races. Then came darkness, conflict, and the guardians going into hiding to preserve themselves and their knowledge for a future time when they would be needed again. "Dragons," Sarah breathed. "You're actually dragons. Not just legends, but real living beings who've been sleeping for millions of years." The dragon nodded emphatically, then showed her more images. These depicted the eggs being scattered across the galaxy, hidden away until they could find worthy caretakers who possessed the strength and wisdom to help them rebuild their civilization. "And somehow I qualified?" Sarah shook her head. "I fix broken engines for a living. I'm not exactly guardian material." The dragon tilted its head and touched the screen again. New text appeared, this time in perfect standard galactic. "Worthiness is not determined by status or knowledge, but by character and the willingness to do what is right even when it is difficult." Sarah stared at the words. "You can communicate normally. Why all the meowing and chirping?" Dragons who reveal their true nature too quickly often find themselves in cages, being studied by those who would use their power for selfish purposes. The text continued. "It is safer to be underestimated." Smart. Sarah thought about Captain Vextar and the Zephyrian traders. So those traders who sold you knew what you were. The Zephyrians are descendants of a race that once served the dragons. They have been watching for signs of our return. They believed a human mechanic with a reputation for honesty and ingenuity would be a suitable guardian. Great, no pressure there. Sarah rubbed her temples. "And the people who broke into my workshop?" The dragon's expression darkened, and the text that appeared made Sarah's blood run cold. "The Devourers, an ancient enemy we thought extinct. They feed on the life force of sentient beings and seek to claim dragon power for their own purposes. They must have detected my awakening." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "How many of them are there?" "Unknown. They are skilled at hiding among other species, taking their forms and infiltrating their societies. They could be anyone." "Wonderful." Sarah started pacing the small space, her mind racing. So we got shape-shifting energy vampires hunting us. You're actually a member of an ancient guardian species, and somehow I'm supposed to protect you while you... What exactly? Grow stronger. Learn about this new age. Find others of my kind who may have awakened. The dragon paused, then added, and perhaps teach your species what we once taught others, if you prove worthy of such knowledge. Sarah stopped pacing and stared at the little creature. Despite its small size and harmless appearance, there was something in those bright eyes that spoke of vast intelligence and ancient wisdom. This wasn't a pet or even just an exotic animal. This was a being that had existed when humans were still figuring out fire. "What do you need from me?" she asked quietly. "Protection while I grow, guidance about this time and place." And, most importantly, the text on the screen emphasized the next words: friendship. Dragons are not meant to exist alone. Something in the simple honesty of that statement made Sarah's chest tighten. Here was a creature of legend, awakening to find itself the last of its kind in a hostile universe. And all it really wanted was not to be alone. "You've got it," Sarah said firmly. "But we need to be smart about this. The station isn't safe anymore, and I don't know who we can trust." The dragon chirped happily and touched the screen again. "I have been monitoring the station's communications since awakening. The intruders have reported failure to their superiors. They believe we escaped the station entirely." "Good. Let them think that." Sarah studied the power conduit schematics on a nearby screen. "But we still need to get out of here eventually. I've got a small ship in the docking bay, but getting to it without being seen will be tricky. Perhaps not as difficult as you think." The dragon hopped down from the terminal and waddled over to what looked like an ordinary maintenance panel. When it touched the surface with its claw, the panel slid aside to reveal a complex control interface that definitely wasn't part of standard station equipment. "What is that?" Sarah asked. "Ancient technology integrated into the station's infrastructure. My awakening activated certain dormant systems." The dragon's text appeared on the nearest screen. "This station was built on the ruins of an old dragon outpost. That is not a coincidence." Sarah felt like the universe was playing an elaborate joke on her. "So, you're telling me I've been working on a station that was built on top of a dragon base?" "Correct. The Zephyrians guided the station's construction to this location, knowing that eventually one of us would awaken here." The dragon manipulated controls that Sarah couldn't even see clearly. "I can use these systems to help us reach your ship undetected." The lights in the maintenance bay shifted subtly, and Sarah heard the almost inaudible hum of systems activating throughout the station. On the status displays, she watched as security cameras in key corridors began cycling through maintenance routines, creating blind spots in the surveillance network. "Show off," Sarah muttered, but she was impressed despite herself. The dragon made what might have been a chuckling sound and continued its work. "The path to Docking Bay 7 will be clear for precisely 18 minutes. We should leave now." Sarah picked up the dragon, surprised again by how solid and warm it felt. "Do you have a name?" Thorn appeared on the screen as they headed for the maintenance tunnel that would take them toward the docking bays. "And you are Sarah Chun, independent mechanic, graduate of the Mars Technical Institute, currently wanted for questioning by 3 different law enforcement agencies." 3. Sarah paused. "I only knew about 2. The Galactic Trade Commission has added you to their watch list as of 47 minutes ago. Apparently, someone reported unusual energy signatures associated with your work. My life just keeps getting more complicated." Sarah started climbing through the tunnel, following the route Thorn indicated. "What's your plan once we get off the station?" "Survive. Learn. Find others like me if they exist." Thorn's weight in her arms was comforting, solid, and real in a way that made the whole situation feel less like a fever dream. And perhaps discover why the ancient enemy has returned now, after so many millions of years. They moved through the station's hidden passages in companionable silence, following routes that Sarah had never seen before but which Thorn seemed to know intimately. Emergency lighting activated just ahead of them and deactivated behind them, creating a moving bubble of illumination that would be invisible to the station's monitoring systems. "Thorn," Sarah said as they approached the final stretch to the docking bays, "what exactly are dragons capable of when you're fully grown?" "Why do you ask?" "Because if we're going to be partners in this, I need to know what I'm signing up for." Sarah paused at an intersection, waiting for Thorn to indicate which way to go. The stories make dragons sound like forces of nature. Planet crackers. Galaxy shakers. The stories are not entirely wrong. Thorn's text appeared on her wrist communicator. But power without wisdom is destruction. Power with wisdom is creation. True dragons are builders, teachers, protectors. We reshape reality not through force, but through understanding. And how long before you reach that level? Years, perhaps decades. I am currently the equivalent of what you might call a hatchling, despite my ancient knowledge. My power must grow with my physical form, or the imbalance would destroy both of us. They reached the access hatch that would take them into Docking Bay 7. Through the small porthole, Sarah could see her ship, a modified cargo hauler called the Wanderer that she'd bought with her savings and converted into a mobile workshop. It wasn't much to look at, but the engines were solid and the hull was reinforced enough to handle some rough treatment. "One last question," Sarah said as she prepared to open the hatch. "Why do I get the feeling this is all just the beginning?" Thorn's response appeared on her communicator with what seemed like amusement. "Because you are a very perceptive human, Sarah Chun. The awakening of even one dragon will send ripples through the galaxy. Others will sense it, both friend and foe. Our quiet life ended the moment my egg cracked open." Sarah sighed. "I should have just kept fixing engines." "Perhaps. But then who would have helped a small dragon learn about friendship in a universe that has forgotten we ever existed?" The simple sincerity of the statement made Sarah smile despite everything. "Come on, then. Let's go find out what trouble we can get into among the stars." She opened the hatch and stepped into the docking bay, Thorn alert and ready in her arms. The Wanderer waited for them like a promise of freedom, its hull gleaming under the bay's lights. Sarah had no idea where they would go or what they would find, but for the first time since the whole crazy adventure began, she was actually looking forward to finding out. Behind them, hidden in the station's depths, ancient systems quietly returned to dormancy. But the network remained active, waiting and watching, ready to help the next dragon who might awaken to find themselves alone in a hostile universe. Thorn had been right about one thing. This was definitely just the beginning. And as Sarah keyed the entry code for her ship, she found herself hoping they were both ready for whatever came next. The galaxy had just become a much more interesting and dangerous place. 3 weeks after fleeing Nexus Station, Sarah discovered that traveling with a dragon was nothing like the adventure stories made it seem. For one thing, Thorn was incredibly picky about food. He could survive on standard rations, but he had strong opinions about seasoning. For another, he had appointed himself the ship's unofficial technical advisor and seemed to take personal offense whenever something wasn't running at peak efficiency. The primary thruster alignment is off by 0.03%. Appeared on Sarah's workstation screen as she tried to enjoy her morning coffee in peace. "It's within acceptable parameters," Sarah replied, not looking up from her technical manual. She was studying hyperspace navigation systems, trying to figure out their next move. "Acceptable is not optimal." Thorn's response scrolled across the display with what seemed like mechanical smugness. Sarah looked over at the dragon, who had grown noticeably in the past weeks. He was now about the size of a small dog, with more defined features and scales that had deepened from blue-green to a rich emerald color with gold highlights. His wings had developed enough that he could actually fly for short distances around the ship's interior. "You know what? Fine. Fix it yourself if it bothers you so much." Thorn perked up immediately and launched himself from his favorite perch near the environmental controls. He landed gracefully on a navigation console and extended one claw toward the interface. Sarah watched in fascination as streams of code flowed across multiple screens simultaneously. "I will never get used to that," she muttered. The ship's engines changed pitch slightly as Thorn made his adjustments, and Sarah had to admit the vibration in the deck plates felt smoother. She was about to make a comment about showing off when proximity alarms began blaring throughout the ship. What the? Sarah was already moving toward the pilot's seat when Thorn's urgent text appeared on every screen at once. 4 ships approaching. Configuration unknown. Intent appears hostile. Sarah dropped into her seat and activated the tactical display. 4 sleek vessels were closing on their position, their designs unlike anything in her databases. They moved with an eerie coordination that suggested either linked AI systems or extremely experienced pilots. "Can you scan them?" Sarah asked while powering up the Wanderer's defensive systems. Her ship wasn't built for combat, but she'd made some modifications over the years. Attempting now. Thorn's response appeared just as the lead ship opened communications. The face that appeared on her main screen made Sarah's blood run cold. It was humanoid, but wrong in subtle ways that made her skin crawl. The features were too perfect, too symmetrical, and the eyes held an emptiness that seemed to look right through her. "Greetings, human," the thing said in a voice devoid of emotion. "You carry something that belongs to us. Surrender the dragon, and your death will be quick." "Counter-offer," Sarah said, her hands already working the flight controls. "Go find a black hole and jump into it." The transmission cut off, and the 4 ships immediately began attack formation. Sarah gunned the engines and threw the Wanderer into a sharp turn, heading for the nearby asteroid field they'd been using for cover. "Any brilliant ideas?" she called out as energy bolts began flashing past their hull. Thorn had braced himself against the navigation console, his claws extended for grip. Text scrolled rapidly across the screens. "The asteroid field contains unusual mineral formations. I believe I can use them to amplify my abilities temporarily." "Do it." Sarah dove the ship between 2 massive asteroids as more weapons fire lit up the space around them. The Wanderer's shields flared as debris and energy blasts impacted the hull. Behind them, the 4 pursuit ships followed with mechanical precision, never seeming to lose their formation despite the chaotic environment of the asteroid field. "There!" Thorn's text highlighted a particular asteroid on the scanner. "That one contains crystallized tachyon deposits. Guess close." Sarah didn't ask how a dragon could possibly know the mineral composition of random space rocks. She just threw the ship into another violent turn, heading for Thorn's target while dodging both asteroids and weapons fire. As they approached the designated asteroid, something extraordinary happened. Thorn began to glow, not the soft luminescence she'd seen when he was interfacing with computers, but a brilliant golden radiance that filled the entire cockpit. The ship's systems responded immediately, performance indicators jumping well beyond normal parameters. "Sarah" appeared on her screen, but this time the text seemed to pulse with that same golden light. "Trust me. When I give the signal, reverse thrust and present our ventral hull to the pursuing ships. That'll make us a sitting duck. Trust me." One of the pursuit ships managed to get a solid hit on their starboard shield generator. Alarms blared as the protective field collapsed on that side, leaving them vulnerable to the next attack. "Now!" Thorn's text blazed across every screen. Sarah reversed thrust so hard that the inertial dampeners couldn't fully compensate. She was thrown forward in her seat as the Wanderer came to an almost complete stop, rotating to expose its belly to the attacking ships. For a moment that felt like eternity, they hung motionless while 4 weapons arrays targeted them from point-blank range. Then, Thorn spread his wings. Golden energy erupted from the dragon in waves that passed harmlessly through the Wanderer's hull, but struck the asteroid field like a tsunami of living light. The tachyon deposits Thorn had identified began to resonate, creating a chain reaction that spread from asteroid to asteroid in an expanding sphere of brilliant energy. The 4 pursuit ships, caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of what amounted to an artificial star in their midst, found their sensors overloaded and their weapons systems disrupted. Two of them collided with asteroids they could no longer see clearly. The other two began firing wildly in all directions, their targeting systems completely confused by the energy interference. Go! Thorn's text appeared weakly on a single screen as his glow faded to its normal level. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She pushed the engines to maximum and dove deeper into the asteroid field while their attackers were still trying to figure out what had happened. By the time the resonance effect faded, the Wanderer was long gone, hidden among thousands of similar rocks in the outer reaches of the field. That was incredible, Sarah breathed, checking their position and making sure they weren't being followed. How did you do that? Thorn swayed slightly on his perch, obviously exhausted. Dragons are not just biological entities. We exist partially in subspace, where thought and energy are more closely linked. The tachyon crystals allowed me to amplify that connection temporarily. And you couldn't have mentioned this ability before. I was not certain it would work. My power is still growing, and attempting something beyond my current capabilities could have been problematic. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Problematic how? The last time a young dragon overextended themselves attempting such a technique, they accidentally shifted their entire solar system into a parallel dimension. Okay, point taken. Sarah began plotting a course out of the system. We need to find somewhere safe to lay low while we figure out our next move. Those things will be back, probably with friends. There's a place. Thorn's text appeared thoughtfully. The ancient records speak of hidden sanctuaries, built by the first dragons for exactly this type of emergency. One should be in the Kepler Nebula, approximately 8 days' travel at maximum hyperspace speed. Should be. The records are incomplete, and the sanctuary may not still exist after so many years. Sarah thought about their limited options. They couldn't return to civilized space without putting others at risk, and staying on the run indefinitely wasn't sustainable. It's better than wandering around waiting for more of those things to find us. Set course for the Kepler Nebula. As the hyperspace engine spun up, Sarah found herself thinking about what Thorn had said during the fight. The Devourers had claimed the dragon belonged to them. That suggested a history between the two species that went far deeper than just ancient enemies. Thorn, she said carefully, those creatures said you belonged to them. What do they mean by that? The dragon was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. Finally, text appeared on the screen. The Devourers were once like us. Dragons, or at least our cousins. They chose a different path, seeking power through consumption rather than creation. The war that followed nearly destroyed both species. And now they think they can claim you? They believe that all dragons are rightfully theirs to command or consume. It is one of the reasons my people went into hiding. Even victory over such enemies is a form of defeat if it requires you to become like them. Sarah felt a chill at the implications. How many of them are there? Unknown. They are skilled at hiding, and their shape-changing abilities make them difficult to track. They could be anywhere, anyone. Thorn paused, but their presence here, now, suggests that something has changed. They would not risk exposure unless they believed the potential reward was worth it. What kind of reward? The return of true dragons to the galaxy. If they could capture and corrupt one of us, especially a young one still learning to control their power. Thorn's text trailed off ominously. Sarah didn't need him to finish the thought. A corrupted dragon with the power she'd just witnessed could do unimaginable damage. And if the Devourers could figure out how to replicate or amplify that power, then we make sure that doesn't happen, she said firmly. We find this sanctuary, we learn everything we can about these enemies, and we figure out how to stop them. Thorn's text seemed surprised. You think I'm going to abandon you to those things? Not happening. Sarah leaned back in her pilot's seat as the stars shifted into the familiar pattern of hyperspace. Besides, someone needs to keep you from getting your head too big when your power grows. Can't have you accidentally relocating solar systems. That only happened once. Thorn's response carried a tone of wounded dignity. Once is more than enough. Sarah grinned despite their situation. Get some rest. We've got a long journey ahead of us, and Something tells me things are going to get a lot more complicated before they get simpler. As Thorn curled up in his favorite spot near the environmental controls, Sarah tried to process everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, her biggest worry had been finding enough work to keep her ship fueled. Now she was the guardian of a baby dragon, hunted by ancient shape-shifting enemies, and heading toward a possibly mythical sanctuary in uncharted space. She should probably be terrified. Instead, she found herself oddly excited about what they might discover. The universe had suddenly become a much bigger, stranger place, full of possibilities she'd never imagined. And, despite the danger, she had to admit that traveling with a dragon was never boring. The Wanderer continued its journey through hyperspace, carrying its unlikely crew toward whatever waited in the Kepler Nebula. Behind them, space was already filling with more Devourer ships, spreading out in search patterns that covered light years of empty void. The hunt was on, and the stakes were higher than either Sarah or Thorn fully understood. But they had something their enemies didn't: trust, friendship, and a shared determination to protect something precious from those who would corrupt or destroy it. It would have to be enough. The Kepler Nebula was even more beautiful than the star charts had suggested. Vast clouds of luminous gas in shades of purple and gold stretched across millions of cubic kilometers of space, lit from within by the fierce radiation of young stars. It was the kind of sight that made even experienced space travelers stop and stare in wonder. Sarah was doing exactly that when Thorn's urgent text appeared on her screen. "We are not alone here." She immediately dropped her gaze to the tactical display, but the readings were confusing. The nebula's dense gases and high energy output made conventional sensors nearly useless, but there was definitely something large moving through the clouds ahead of them. "How can you tell?" she asked, beginning evasive maneuvers just in case. "I can sense it," Thorn replied, and for the first time his text carried overtones of something like excitement. Another dragon. Sarah's heart skipped. In all their discussions about the hidden sanctuary, she'd wondered if they might actually find other survivors. But facing the possibility made her realize how much their lives would change if Thorn wasn't the last of his kind after all. "Are you sure?" "Positive. The resonance is unmistakable." Thorn had grown even more over their journey to the nebula. He was now nearly the size of a large dog, his scales having deepened to a rich emerald shot through with veins of gold. His intelligence seemed to be growing as rapidly as his body. But something is wrong. The signal is distorted. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, proximity alarms began chiming. A shape emerged from the glowing gas clouds ahead of them. A ship unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Wanderer, but it moved with an organic grace that suggested living tissue rather than metal construction. "That's not a ship," she breathed, studying the readings. "No." Thorn's text appeared grimly. "It's a dragon, but not as nature intended." The creature that approached them was indeed draconic, but horribly wrong. Where Thorn's scales gleamed with natural beauty, this being's hide was a patchwork of organic tissue and mechanical augmentation. Cables and conduits ran along its flanks like parasitic vines, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural red light that pulsed in rhythm with the technological additions. Devourer work. Thorn's text carried overtones of sadness and rage. "They have corrupted one of my people." The corrupted dragon opened communications, and the voice that emerged was a twisted harmony of organic and digital tones. "Little brother, you have come at last. The masters will be so pleased." "I'm not your brother." Thorn's response appeared on Sarah's screen, but she could tell he was communicating directly with the other dragon as well. "And those creatures are not your masters. They saved me," the corrupted being replied, banking closer to the Wanderer. "When I awoke alone and afraid, they found me. They gave me purpose, power, and understanding, as they will give you once you accept their gifts." Sarah was already charging weapons and preparing for evasive maneuvers when Thorn's urgent text stopped her. "Do not attack. Despite what has been done to him, he is still my kin. There may be a way to help him. Help him? Thorn, that thing is working for our enemies. Because he believes he has no choice. But dragons were not meant to exist alone. Thorn's text paused, then continued with what seemed like growing determination. All young dragons are vulnerable to corruption if they awaken without proper guidance. I was fortunate to find you. He was not. The corrupted dragon was close enough now that Sarah could see the details of its augmentation. Mechanical components have been grafted directly into living tissue, creating a fusion that was both impressive and revolting. Whoever had done this possessed incredible technological skill, but no regard for the dignity of the being they were altering. Come with me, little brother, the corrupted dragon continued. Let me show you the wonders our masters can offer. Together we can reshape this galaxy as it was always meant to be shaped, under the guidance of superior beings. I have seen their gifts. Thorn's response appeared both on Sarah's screen and, she suspected, in the other dragon's mind. They are chains disguised as treasures. You speak from ignorance. Observe. What happened next made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The corrupted dragon began to glow, but instead of Thorn's warm golden light, this was a harsh silver radiance that seemed to draw energy from the surrounding space. The nebula's gases began to swirl in response, forming complex patterns that spoke of immense power under precise control. Impressive, Thorn admitted. But what is the cost? For a moment, the other dragon's glow flickered, and Sarah thought she saw something like pain in those red eyes. Cost? What cost could be too high for such power? Your freedom, your individuality, your soul. The corrupted dragon's response was immediate and violent. Energy bolts lanced out from its augmented limbs, forcing Sarah to throw the Wanderer into an emergency dive that sent both her and Thorn tumbling across the cockpit. So be it. The creature snarled as Sarah struggled to regain control. If you will not come willingly, I will deliver you to the masters in pieces. They can rebuild you as they rebuilt me. The chase that followed was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The corrupted dragon was massive and powerful, but the Wanderer was smaller and more maneuverable. Sarah used every trick she'd learned in her years of flying through dangerous systems, diving through dense gas clouds, and using the nebula's energy fields to mask their emissions. But their pursuer was learning, adapting its tactics with each passing moment. The mechanical augmentations weren't just providing power, they were enhancing its intelligence, turning it into a hybrid of organic intuition and digital processing speed. We can't outrun him forever, Sarah called out as another energy blast came uncomfortably close. And we definitely can outfight him. There is another option. Thorn's text appeared, pulsing with that familiar golden light. But it is dangerous, and I will need your help. What do you need? The sanctuary should be nearby. If we can reach it, there may be defenses still active. But more importantly, there will be memory crystals, repositories of knowledge from the age when dragons were teachers and guardians instead of weapons. Sarah saw where he was going. You want to try to restore him. The corruption goes deep, but it is still corruption. Underneath the mechanical additions and mental programming, he is still a dragon. Still my kin. Thorn's text paused. I cannot become what I was meant to be if I abandon those who need help. Another energy blast rocked the ship, and Sarah made her decision. Tell me what to do. Following Thorn's guidance, she dove deeper into the nebula, heading for a region where the gas clouds glowed with an unusual spectrum that hurt the eyes to look at directly. The corrupted dragon followed relentlessly, its augmented senses apparently unaffected by the visual distortion. There! Thorn's text highlighted a reading on the scanner. The energy signature is unmistakable. What emerged from the glowing clouds ahead of them was breathtaking. The sanctuary was carved into the heart of a massive asteroid, but it was clearly the work of incredible artistry as much as engineering. Spires and graceful arches covered its surface, all glowing with the same warm light that Thorn emitted when he used his abilities. How do we get in? Sarah asked, studying the readings. I don't see any obvious docking bays. Dragons rarely need such crude accommodations, Thorn replied. Reduce speed, and trust me. As they approached the sanctuary, Thorn began to glow again. This time, however, the light seemed to reach out from him, forming tendrils of energy that connected with the ancient structure. Sarah felt the ship respond to controls that weren't hers, guiding them toward what looked like a solid wall. The wall dissolved as they approached, revealing a vast hangar space beyond. The Wanderer settled gently onto a landing platform that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal. Welcome to the Sanctuary of First Light. Thorn's text appeared as they shut down the engines. The oldest surviving dragon stronghold in this galaxy. Behind them, the corrupted dragon burst through the concealed entrance, its red eyes blazing with fury. You cannot hide from me here, little brother. I know this place as well as you do now. But as it entered the sanctuary, something changed. The harsh silver glow of its augmentations began to flicker, and for the first time, Sarah heard uncertainty in its voice. What is this place? Home, Thorn said simply, launching himself from the ship and flying toward the center of the hangar. The place where young dragons learn what they are meant to become. The sanctuary responded to Thorn's presence, ancient systems awakening after eons of dormancy. Crystalline formations throughout the space began to glow with warm light, and the air itself seemed to thicken with power and memory. The corrupted dragon landed heavily, its mechanical components sparking as they struggled against some form of interference. The masters, they never told me. I remember. Remember, Thorn urged, alighting on a crystal formation near the center of the hangar. Remember what you were before they found you. Remember what dragons are supposed to be. Sarah watched in fascination as the memory crystals around the hangar began to resonate, filling the air with images and sounds from the ancient past. She saw dragons as they had been, not weapons or tools, but teachers and guardians working alongside dozens of younger species to build civilizations that span galaxies. The corrupted dragon cried out, a sound of such pain and longing that it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. The mechanical augmentations began to smoke and spark as they fought against the sanctuary's influence. I remember, the creature whispered, My name was Ember. Before they changed me, before they made me forget. Ember, Thorn said gently, approaching his corrupted brother. You can choose differently now. The sanctuary can help heal what was done to you. But even as hope began to bloom, new alarms echoed through the hangar. Ships were approaching, dozens of them, filling the space outside the sanctuary with hostile intent. The Devourers, Sarah breathed, studying the tactical displays that had appeared on crystalline surfaces throughout the hangar. They followed us here. Ember's head snapped up, the red glow in his eyes flickering between artificial programming and natural consciousness. No, unless they command me. You have a choice, Thorn said firmly. You are a dragon. No one commands you unless you allow it. The lead Devourer ship opened communications, and the face that appeared on the sanctuary's displays was even more wrong than the one Sarah had seen before. This one looked ancient, its features a patchwork of different species and augmentations that spoke of countless acts of consumption and absorption. Return our property to us, it commanded, its voice echoing with harmonics that hurt to hear. The corrupted one has served its purpose in leading us to this place. Now we will claim both dragons and whatever knowledge this sanctuary contains. Over my dead body, Sarah said, checking the sanctuary's defensive systems. That can certainly be arranged, the Devourer replied with what might have been amusement. Thorn moved to the center of the crystal formation, his glow intensifying as he connected with the sanctuary's systems. Sarah, I need you to help me with something. It will be dangerous, but it's the only way to stop them. What do you need? The sanctuary has defenses, but they require 2 dragons to activate properly. One to provide power, one to provide guidance. Thorn looked at Ember, who was struggling against the mechanical commands trying to override his consciousness. I can provide the power, but I need someone who understands both dragon nature and the corruption the devourers represent. Sarah saw what he was asking. You want him to help defend the place they're trying to attack. I want him to choose who he really is. Ember's augmentations sparked violently as the internal conflict raged. Sarah could see the pain it was causing him, but she could also see something else, determination. I choose. Ember struggled to speak through the electronic interference. I choose to be a dragon. What happened next was beyond anything Sarah could have imagined. Ember's natural fire erupted from within, burning away the mechanical augmentations in a display of power that shook the entire asteroid. As the corrupted technology fell away, his true form was revealed. Scales of deep orange and gold, wings that caught and reflected the sanctuary's light, eyes that blazed with intelligence and fury. Now, Thorn said, extending his power to link with his brothers. Let's show these parasites what real dragons can do. The sanctuary's defenses activated like a sleeping giant awakening. Energy cannons that had been hidden within the asteroid's surface emerged and began firing with devastating accuracy. The Devourer ships found themselves caught in a crossfire that turned their numerical advantage into a deadly trap. But the true power of the sanctuary wasn't in its weapons. It was in its ability to reveal truth. As the ancient systems came fully online, every Devourer ship was suddenly illuminated with scanning beams that cut through their disguises and revealed their true nature to any who cared to look. Sarah watched the tactical displays in horror as she saw what the Devourers really were: writhing masses of absorbed biomass and stolen technology, shapeshifters that had consumed so many different species that they could no longer remember what they had originally been. No wonder they want dragon power, she breathed. They're falling apart. The battle was brief but decisive. The Devourer ships, designed for stealth and surprise attacks, couldn't withstand the focused assault of an ancient dragon stronghold. One by one, they were destroyed or driven off, leaving only debris and silence in the nebula. As the last enemy ship fled into hyperspace, Ember collapsed to the crystal floor, exhausted but free. The mechanical augmentations lay around him like discarded chains. Thank you, he said simply, looking at Thorn with eyes that held no trace of artificial influence. I had forgotten what it meant to choose. We all need reminders sometimes, Thorn replied, settling beside his brother. And we all need family. Sarah looked around the sanctuary, taking in the wealth of knowledge contained in its crystal formations. So what happens now? Now we learn, Thorn said. We study what the ancients knew, we help Ember heal completely, and we prepare for what comes next, which is the Devourers will return, probably with reinforcements. But, more importantly, our battle here will have been sensed by any other dragons in the galaxy. If they exist, they will come looking for answers. Sarah grinned. So we're going from hiding from enemies to potentially hosting family reunions. Something like that. Thorn's text carried overtones of amusement. Is that a problem? Sarah looked around the incredible sanctuary, thought about everything they'd been through, and realized that despite the danger and uncertainty, she wouldn't trade this adventure for all the peaceful engine repairs in the galaxy. Not at all, she said, but we're definitely going to need a bigger ship. As the sanctuary settled back into watchful quiet, its ancient systems maintaining vigilance over the approaches while its newest inhabitants began the process of learning and healing, the universe seemed a little less lonely. Dragons had returned to the galaxy, and with them, the possibility that the age of guardians and teachers might come again. The journey that had begun with a joke gift from an alien trader had become something far greater than any of them could have imagined. And this was still only the beginning.